We are truly blessed, and we give thanks for every day that we live and breathe and celebrate those loved ones that go home to rejoice and make new their being. Can I get a oh yeah? Can I get a uh-huh? Well, this is our song tonight. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us and the world can be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A fellowship of woman and man. Imagine all the people sharing all this world. Ooh, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I know that I am not the only one. I trust someday you will join us, and the world will live as one. And ladies and gentlemen, keep your hands together for our wonderful David Sexton. And celebration.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight and celebrating the one, the only, the amazing David Leddick. Because David loved recording his life and doing all things David, he actually wrote an obituary before he passed away. Of course. He wasn't going to let anybody else write it. And he was always, no procrastinator, that's for sure. So he had it ready in a drawer. So we're using that tonight as a bit of a framework. The speakers are going to read a little bit of the obituary, share some stories. So I'm going to start out with the first passages of his obituary, the words of David Leddick. David Leddick, born January 14th, 1930 in Detroit, Michigan, is an American author, playwright, and actor. Brought up in a small Midwestern Michigan town of Montague, he was there during the deep 1930s Depression and World War II. In the 50s, he began a career as a naval officer, then a ballet dancer, finally an advertising executive before turning to writing books and plays in the 1990s. He did it all. Leddick served in the United States Navy during the Korean War and was on troop ship at Bikini witnessing the hydrogen bomb blasts. And then he had a brief career as a dancer at the Metropolitan Opera, the Old Met in New York, performing in productions with the star Maria Callas. For those of you who knew David, like we all did, he was a dancer, and he would arrive on stage with a bunch of other muscly men and attractive women in scantily clad costumes, and they were referred to as the Sex Squad, because they added a little bit of something to the opera productions. He wrote a book about it called The Sex Squad. David then began a career in advertising. My favorite, I didn't really understand how big a deal David Leddick's advertising career was until watching Mad Men, and they started talking about gray advertising. Gray advertising is like the big rival for John Hamm and the other advertisers. My favorite David Leddick story on advertising was he would have these wonderful campaigns that he would bring to these dull executives, and always they would have several options, right? Always they would have a stellar option and then the safest possible option, which invariably the stodgy executives would choose. And he would say to his team as they were leaving, after they were all disheartened because they had chosen the most boring possible thing, he would say, no, remember, we offered them caviar. They chose peanut butter, but we offered them caviar. Yes, it's classic David. You'll hear a lot of Leddickisms tonight. To share some more wonderful Leddickisms, I want to bring to the stage David's niece and a beloved member of the Miami Beach community, Sarah Leddick.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for turning out for him. I'm sure that he's floating around here somewhere on his broom. Really, really excited that he had so many friends in one place at the same time. Well, as I kind of rewrote this whole, obituary thing, so I was going to kind of look it over and see if there's anything that we missed out on during what David started. But one of the things that one of his friends from Pont-la-Voie actually sent me a text saying, please don't forget the fact that he was a Zen Buddhist. And so I just wanted to, for those of you who knew him even when he lived in New York, he was a devoted Zen Buddhist, and he not only meditated on a daily basis, but he visited zendos for week-long retreats in New York and as far away as China. And I remember on his trip to China, how excited he was about going to China. He never did anything just for the sake of doing it. There was always some kind of point for doing it and, reason for doing it, and that's why he went to China, so that he could go there and actually practice his, meditation. And literally they fasted for an entire week. I don't know how he did it. But he always said, I get to come back skinnier and looking better, so it's, well worth it. So one of the things that I always noticed about David was that he always carried fresh $10 bills in his wallet, so that he could hand out his money, the $10 bill to a needy person on the street. He did that particularly in New York, where there's an awful lot of homeless people. And he learned some of these people's names, and would say, salute them and say hi to them when he would hand them the money. So, it's just amazing. And I think he got that from his Buddhist training, quite honestly, and his meditation. So basically, let me see if I can remember anything about he lived in New York for 50 years, so he was around watching New York completely transform. He bought his apartment on Greenwich Street when it was a dilapidated apartment building, and I remember the building across the street was just a gutted warehouse, and over the years that whole neighborhood came up, so Greenwich Village became quite the place to live. And David always had that sense of, where do you move where you can afford to buy a bunch of property there and then watch it improve and then sell it later at a much improved price. And one of the things that he did when he lived in France was he started buying these little houses, these little rundown houses in Amboise, which is where Da Vinci used to live and was buried. And at one point he had 4 tiny little houses in Amboise. And in Pont-la-Voie, where he bought his bigger house, he also bought up a bunch of stuff on the street behind his house, and he owned 3 houses there that he fixed up that had been abandoned for years and years and years. And I also bought in Pont-la-Voie, and I still own my house there. And up until last week, David still owned his house in Pont-la-Voie as well. Okay, so one of the things that I want to tell you about is my experience with David over the years. I met David almost 69 years ago, and because David was stationed in San Francisco at Mare Island in the Navy, and he came down for my birth in Monterey. So I literally met him when I was a couple of days old. And my relationship with him lasted throughout, the past 69 years, except for a kind of a dark period for about 10 years. We didn't speak to each other. He was kind of on a thing, and so we, as he's been known to do from time to time with people, but we ran into each other at the Byron Carlisle almost 10 years ago, and I knew that he didn't want to speak to me at that point in time, and he came up and tapped me on the back and said hi, and we started chatting, and he said, let's do lunch, which he says to everybody, and sure enough, he called me, and we did lunch, and we have not stopped seeing each other since then. So it's been 10 years of bliss, probably the better, decade of my relationship with him than ever in my lifetime, because finally I could do something for him. He finally needed me to help him because he was now a senior. He was 83 years old, and for a lot of people, that's really old, and he needed to have family close by, and that's what I did for him. So when I was in the 6th grade, my grandmother, Blanche, David's mother, took me to New York to go visit him. And he took me to Bloomingdale's, and he bought me an entire wardrobe of clothes. And then he took us to the theater. My brother Matt was there at the time, too, and he took us to the theater, and we went to the ballet, and we went to Broadway plays, and it was magical. I felt like I was Marlo Thomas and that girl, honestly. It was, the same era, and it was the same kind of clothes, same fashion and everything. It was just so exciting for me. And that pretty much set me in a certain direction of loving clothes. I wound up becoming a model after David helped launch my career, and my brother Matt's career as well. He took us to Europe, and we lived in his house in Paris, and he got us with agencies. Matt went off to Milan and wound up with a successful career, much more successful than my career, because he wound up being kind of a big deal in New York for many, many years. But we both started, traveling, my brother and I. We learned foreign languages. We got to see the world in a way that you never would, because we got paid for being there, which was great. And if it weren't for David, my life would be completely different. I would not be here in Miami Beach, quite honestly. I don't know where I would be. What else did I want to tell you about? Well, our photo shoots. I mean, David got us test shoots with people like Scavullo and Avedon and Irving Penn. I mean, he was, friendly with all of these, fantastic photographers. But not only that, he got Harry King to do my hair and Way Bandy to do my makeup. So, I mean, can you do any better than that when you're just a brand new model that has no portfolio at all, and just, helping me launch a career and sending me off to Europe, and everything just took off after that. So, over the years, David became a frequent visitor to my home in Madrid. I lived there for 18 years, learned to speak fluent Spanish. And when my relationship with my boyfriend, who was the father of my son, broke up, he sheltered me when I came back to the States. And he bought the house that I now live in today. And he's taken care of me throughout my entire life. So I really felt like I could pay it forward and give something back to him these last 10 years, and I'm so happy that I did. Thank you. I'd like to introduce his good friend Eddie Goicoleo now, who's also going to tell you a few stories about his experiences with David.
First, I want to apologize to David Sexton. I was in the program and I took myself out. I wasn't going to speak until David came in my head. You love me and you're not going to say anything? Just so you know, I don't cry. Well, I've cried a couple times in my life in private. When something bad happens, I pretend it doesn't happen. I put denial. I just bury it. I didn't want to come here because say it in front of you, it's real. So, when I first heard the news, I was watching TV next to my husband. the phone down. Nothing happened. I continued to watch TV for what felt like half an hour. Fine. Until all the text messages started coming in, and I turned to my husband and I said it out loud. And then everything's blurry, the tears start to well, and then suddenly, gone. I haven't cried yet. I've been in denial. People talk to me, I'd say something lighthearted and then move on. But today I can't. So I got here early because I had to bring the programs. And David's in my head again. He's in all of your heads, all his little anecdotes, his life lessons. You hear him. But I actually argued with him today, and he won. I'm like, I can't go out there. I'm going to fall apart. I'm going to fall apart in front of a whole audience. And David says, so? Because David doesn't understand these things. I go, well, David, I have nothing to say. And David goes, yes, you do. You have a lot of your book downloaded, and there's a dedication with some of my funniest quotes. You could read those. I'm like, well, okay, but I'm going to fall apart in front of them. And again, so you don't like that? Now, if David had a piece of spinach in his teeth, you go, David, there's some spinach in your teeth. What, you don't like that? That's one of David's little anecdotal things that mean more than what he says. He's trying to teach you something. He doesn't care. Why do you care? So I've learned so much from David, and every day I live my life by his lessons, except for one. I can't master this lesson, well, until today. David doesn't see the world the way we do. He lives in a different reality. And I told him many times, I'm like, David, you have to join the real world. It's like, why? My world's beautiful. And he's tried so hard to teach me to see the world differently, but I can't. It's just not in me. David was born this way. When David was 4, he was dating an older man. He was 5. And David goes to his mother and goes, I'm going to marry him. And his mother goes, you can't do that. And David goes, why not? I love him. I'm going to marry him. Well, what is reality today? So there is something to the way David sees the world. But, I told David, I go, don't you care if people don't like you or they make fun of you? He goes, really? They exist? And then, all humor aside, he said, Eddie, sure there are. I don't doubt it. But they're not in my reality. I don't see them. I don't live that life. And I said, but David, you have to live in the real world. You can't just live in denial. Me talking about living in denial. And he goes, no, Eddie, you're the one who's wrong. David didn't know what embarrassment was, humility, fear. Yeah, he's a smart guy. He knew the definition, but he'd never felt those feelings. He doesn't understand what I'm going through today. Trust me, we had a big fight here earlier, and he won because I'm here. So, David will often tell his little funny anecdotal stories. One way he teaches you a lesson is, you're going through something, and maybe not today, but another day, he'll tell you this cute little story, and you're on your way home, and you realize, well, if I change the names in that story and the situation, that was about me. Oh, so that little lesson was meant for me. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's something as simple as going, so? So when David's spirit said that to me today, so means a lot more. And I realized why I don't have a speech. I didn't come prepared. This whole mess that I feel right now, it's because in that moment, I finally learned my lesson. David told me, he goes, you have a short life. You need to live it by your reality. Don't let other people tell you how to live the world. Don't care about what they think. It is your world. You make your own reality, and you decide the roles that they play in it. I never got it. till today. I don't care if I fall apart in front of you. It's my world and my reality, and I love you, David. So I'm here. And I learned the final lesson. And I think the reason of this is for me to pass it on to you. It's a very hard lesson. But your lives are short. Live this world by your reality, not by what they tell you it is. Anyway, apart from that, David, I need a therapist because I'm talking to a spirit. But he told me that I do have some funny quotes, so I will look those up. And while I'm doing that, I will tell you, again, another argument David won was this book. I wanted to make a workout book with really good material, exercises, diet, very scientific, but cool photos. Back then, Abercrombie and Fitch catalogs were in, and like one page would be a guy and a girl, the next page a guy and a guy, a girl and a girl. It's very sexual, and you turn the page, you didn't know what you were looking at, but they were all the rave. She said, I'm going to do that. David goes, oh, your book's amazing. I'll get you the best publisher in the world, and he did, Universal Publishing. He goes, but you're going to be in the book. They're going to be photos of you, just you and another guy. Do that. Well, he won again. But, and I'm glad. Looking back, it was a very good book, and I'm glad I did it. But in the book, I put this dedication. I'd totally forgotten what it said till today when I read it, and it's very much David. It says, wow, this very small writing, and I've got glasses. Hold on. This book is dedicated to a very dear friend, talented writer, and incredible spirit who once shared these words. I have two important pieces of advice for you. First, always moisturize your neck. It might become your face one day. That's very David. Now, second, when I look back upon my greatest successes and my greatest failures, they seem very much the same. The important thing is that I lived, and there are no what might have beens. So dare to do it. Give it your best shot. That way, whether you think you succeed or fail, you actually succeed. David, you are loved more deeply than anyone can ever imagine. Thank you.
Eddie did warn me he was going to cry and get all messy, and I said, David will love it. He will love to see people laughing and crying about him. It's be his favorite thing. I'm going to read a little bit more of the obituary. David Leddick has written over 40 books. He was prolific, including many novels, nonfiction works of gay culture and history. He's considered a pioneering voice in the gay community, and his work often deals with themes of sexuality, gender, and identity. His Lambda Award-winning books, Naked Men and Male Nude, are among the top best-selling picture books. I did a little research on my way over to the theater today, and I went across to the Taschen store, and there was the Male Nude at the Taschen store. Is everyone familiar with it? It's a giant, it's like a Yellow Pages thick book of the history of the male nude. David actually called it the Dick Brick. That was his pet name for it. I recently saw the Male Nude. It was on Grace and Frankie, the television show. When Jane Fonda was suspecting that her husband might be gay, she went into his office, and she realized that on his library was the Male Nude. So it was there. So David has entered into the pop culture lexicon. He is known worldwide as an expert in male nude beauty, and photographers such as George Platt Lyons, Francesco Scovulo, Tom Bianchi, Herb Ritz, and David Vance. So David Vance is here tonight, yes? David, you're here, right? Yes? You're here. Okay, fantastic, good. If David Leddick is the preeminent chronicler of David Leddick, then David Vance has to be a close second. He has worked and collaborated with David on many, many projects, and I wanted to put together a little slideshow of some. When I asked David to send me some photographs, he sent me a lot of photographs, so I put together some of my favorite ones, which I thought were really cute. Starting with, this was from an advice book that David did, This is health, home, and heart. Nice. Next. This is dreams, bar, and bitch. Those are the names. These are the names of the photographs I got them. I love that the t-shirt says, careful or you'll end up in my novel. Can't you hear David saying that? Okay, next one. Why would David settle for just being the leading man in his photographs? So this was a portrait series he did of some of his favorite divas. That is David as Edith Piaf, David as Anne Held, and David as Marlene Dietrich. Of course, yes. So why be the leading man and the leading lady when you can play all the parts? Next slide. These are hilarious, right? This is mother and father. This is friends, and then family. So this is really getting into the theatrical side of David, and David Vance chronicled many of his theatrical shows, including this next one. It's a photograph that I love. Oh, this is David as Quentin Crisp. David as, I believe that's David as Gilda Lilly, one of his famous drag personas, with Clay Tarsitano, who is now the set decorator, set designer for Jennifer Lopez and has sets in the Super Bowl. So David is wonderful at finding and discovering new talent. This is one of my all-time favorite David Leddick, David Vance collaborations. This was David's first cabaret show that he did at the late, great Deauville Hotel. David Leddick at the Deauville. It was wonderful. Okay, you might recognize this next one. It was a play that David Leddick starred in that I wrote, directed by Richard J. Alexander, starring a plethora of wonderful guys, including Edison Farrow, our own Edison Farrow there. It was a huge hit at Miami Shores. Next slide, the first time I think that David Vance photographed him was for the first gay chorus show that he was in. Is that correct, David? I think so. I think so too. Because he had met David through the Male Nude, because David had photographs in it. But I think this was the first time he photographed him. So this was As Time Goes By. It was a production that happened right here on this stage, the Colony Theater. David, it was a story about my relationship with David. As I said, my parents could teach me a lot about being German or being Midwestern, but they couldn't tell me anything about being gay. David was my gay parent, my gay elder, who opened a whole world of my history as a member of the LGBTQ community, and I wanted to chronicle that into a show that I wrote, and then, of course, I wanted David to be in it. Well, this is going to be shocking to many of you, but David was very shy and reluctant to come onto the stage. I know, I can hardly believe it. But that was the truth. I had to cajole and beg him, someone else should do it. No one wants to see me on stage. I retired 40 years ago. But eventually we were able to get him to perform the role. He was wonderful in it. And I knew that he was really becoming comfortable in the role when, towards the end of the rehearsal process, David had a speaking part in it, and he came up to me, and the character he played was Arthur. And he said, David, Arthur wants a number. So we had to add a solo for David. The character of Arthur passes away in As Time Goes By, and then he returns as an angel for the next show that we did together with the chorus. It's a Wonderful Life, and David played the angel Arthur. It's a gay musical version of it. It's a Fabulous Life. It's a gay musical version of It's a Wonderful Life. And go back to that last slide, because some of these people are here tonight. Yeah. So do you see Jerry Chasen? Jerry Chasen is here tonight. That was the late, great Frank Roscigliano. It was a wonderful thing. It also happened here on this stage. That was in 2001, so it's been a minute. Okay, the next one. We continued doing this show. We did Fabulous Life, again, as a more fully fleshed out musical. It's been done all over the country. The next production there, also starring Edison Farrow, Mariel Epps, who you saw earlier tonight, and this cutie pie here with the rainbow nose on, that is Nicholas Richburg, the managing director of Miami New Drama. who was a little mortified to see his picture on the screen with the rainbow nose on. But this is a great opportunity for me to thank Nicholas. As soon as I found out that David had passed, I called him up because I really wanted it to be here at this theater. And Nicholas said, whatever you need, whatever I can do to help you make that happen. We only had 2 nights that we could do it, tonight or May 12th. So I was like, we need to do it now. But they've been amazing. The whole staff here at the Colony Theater has been wonderful. Can we applaud them? They've been fantastic. It's really crazy putting together a memorial service for someone that you love. And it's been wonderful, the outpouring of affection and support that other people who love David has shown. This next one is of the following year with E.L. Lasada, who now has a series on Netflix. It was a great time, and David and Nicholas, or David and E.L., sang a duet in the show that I thought was especially beautiful. And tonight we have Michael Scott Ross and Noah Sonderling. They're going to come out and they're going to sing the song Lavender for you. I hope you enjoy it.
Once there was no world, just a colorless void, so monochromatic the Lord got annoyed. So he took out his paint chips and swatches and blend, then colored it in with a consummate hand. Red for the sunset, blue for the ocean, yellow to grow things green. Then God made lavender for things in between. Warm in the morning, cool in the evening, subtle but somehow bold. When God made lavender, I swear he broke the mold. To some it isn't primary. To me it seems profound. People misuse it. Why did you choose it? Why does the earth go round? Pale in the daybreak, lighting your pillow, deepening all day through. Why ever God made lavender, it looks divine on you. To some it isn't primary. To me it seems profound. People misuse it. Why did you choose it? Why does the earth go round? Fickle and foolish, moody at moments, hardly the neutral view. God must have made me lavender, so I would match with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert, and I cry all the time, so hopefully not tonight. So I wanted to say, so David bought me this watch, and when he bought it for me at the jeweler, he wanted it a lot looser, because he said, Roberto, you've got to be able to shake your hand and just have it fall around. So as you can see, we didn't get quite exactly what he wanted. He gave me this shirt, and if anybody here recognizes the shirt, there's a really good chance it was yours, because David loved hand-me-downs so he can pass them on, whether it was furniture, clothing, household items, whatever it was. He really got joy of doing that. Let me tell you how David came into my life. So I stopped drinking at the end of 2003, so very early in 2004. And my first trip as a sober man was to New York, and I was at my friend's home, and they had a coffee table book, Male Nude Now. And I picked it up, and I saw all these incredible photographers in there and this incredible compilation of art. And I thought, I'm going to buy this book when I get back home. This is going to be my inspiration to get back to doing what I loved, which was photography, male nudes. That's how I started out before the drinking and the drugs kind of took over my life. So I had a razor phone. I texted myself an email. This was really early in the whole texting game. And, David Leddick, Male Nude Now. And, as with most, good ideas, good intentions, I got home and completely forgot about it. A few months later, a friend, Douglas Payne, called me and he said, Robbie, I want you to meet one of my clients. His name is David Leddick, and he does books with artists, and I think you would be perfect in it. And I thought, that name sounds awfully familiar. So I decided to go back through my emails, and sure enough, there it was, David Leddick. And I thought, wow, wow. So we went, and I realized this today. David was always the salesman. He told Douglas, yes, I'd like to meet him, but where we met him was at his show. It wasn't like, come to the house or let's have coffee or something. So the first time I met David, it was at the Deauville, and he was doing Gilda Lilly. So here's David in full drag, and I thought, oh, okay, here we are. Well, that proceeded. I submitted photos. I got to meet Reniel, A few months after that, Douglas again calls me, and he says, Robert, my friend David, which was interesting because he had gone from client to now his friend, he said his assistant just went to Germany because he's in ad school, and he needs someone to help him with his emails. And at first I was like, no, I don't, I can't. He said, no, you can do it. It's just like 3 hours a week. Well, those 3 hours turned into like literally, an 8-hour, 10-hour day with David, whether I was driving him to a show or going to lunch or, sending Ghirardelli chocolates to his friend in New York, whatever it was. And as David was like giving me, advice on my mother who was 80 my 96-year-old mother who had just turned 80 at the time, or, whether it was relationships or sex or, like my life, as David tended to do with all of us, I thought, wow, how did this happen? The book that was going to be my inspiration literally came with the entire person. So I thought, it was, it's like manifesting your own destiny, I thought, wow. So let me read a little bit here, and I think we can leave that slide up. I'm supposed to read something from David's self-written obituary. So, Leddick has also written plays and musicals which have been produced in Miami, London, and off-Broadway. His first full-length musical is based on his experience with the choir, The Secrets of the Chorus. His biggest show, RentBoy, was produced on the New York stage with RentBoy.com, the original and largest male escort listing service online. Leddick often said, if you wanted a good pizza, go pay for it, and the same for good sex. Just go pay for it and enjoy. That was definitely David. And something that David Sexton said earlier when he was talking about his advertising days, I remember David telling me that when he would be sitting there in these really long, boring meetings, he would just be sitting thinking, what am I going to go buy across the street? I guess it was a jewelry store, Tiffany's or something. And at the end of the meeting, he would always say to his coworker, well, what are you thinking of? And she'd be like, oh, I'm going, the weekend I'm going to do and whatever. And he'd be like, oh, I'm going to go buy this piece of jewelry. And, I find myself, whenever I'm in situations like that, I'm thinking, and my husband's over there like, and he knows this about me. I'll be like, I'm going to go to the Disney store, like David loved the jewelry store. Send me to Disney World, I just wanted to share with you like 3 short stories of my experiences with David, and you can go to the next slide now. David, well, let me just, this first slide in the middle, let me just tell you real quick about that. So there's a well-known photographer named Arthur Tress. And I had just started working for David. I'll never forget, I think I had just gotten back off a cruise, and it was like a Sunday. And he said, Roberto, get over here. Arthur Tress is here. And here's David wearing a frock that he had rented from ABC Costume. And, you know, he was in his full glory, and Arthur just kept directing him. And I thought, what am I getting myself into, you know? But David did a lot of shows, and one of his shows that he was working on in Fort Lauderdale, I forget exactly which one it was, but the directions called for him. He had to say the line, "Oh, no, you didn't." And, you know, David, his idea of pop culture was Vogue magazine or the New York Times. So that, you know, if it wasn't there, he had no clue. And the director was like, you've got to say it like a sassy girl, you know. And here's David saying, "Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, no. No, you didn't." And they were like, "David, no, you know, you're a sassy girl." So we went home, and the next day we're in front of his computer, and we're like looking at Ricky Lake clips, you know, of all these sassy girls coming out saying, "Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, no, you didn't." You know, like, and, you know, and David was looking at this, but what fascinated him was like, he looked at me, he goes, "Roberto, are these real people?" And I'm like, "Yes." Like, who are these people, you know? And he's like, and you know, some of David's lines that I'm sure a lot of you have heard, he would be like, "Why are they wearing that on national TV, you know?" Or, "What would her mother think, you know?" Or my favorite, he had this obsession with women's asses. He would be like, "Can you imagine, you know, having that ass?" You know, he was always just fascinated. Well, he did go back, and it was in the show, did the line. It didn't come out as a sassy black girl, but, you know, he did the best he could, you know. Another day, David calls me, and he says, "Roberto, who is Levi Johnston?" And this was like 2009. And I said, "Well, David, you know, Levi Johnston is Sarah Palin's daughter's baby daddy." "Why?" He said, "Well, Us Magazine called me wanting to know my opinion of him." And I was like, "Well, he's going to appear nude in Playgirl." He says, "Well, they want to know what I think about it." So we looked it up, the pictures. And, you know, if I can find a nude photo, if somebody wants me to find a nude photo of somebody online, believe me, I'm the man to go to. So we found the pictures. You know, they weren't out yet. We found them. We looked at them. You know, and it's funny because David, you know, David was always the professional. He gave it his all, and he was always self-promoting, you know. So I wanted to read to you what Us Magazine published, you know. And the title is David Leddick, author of Nude Male and Escort, 40 profiles with photographs of men who sell sex. So this is what the actual, you know, excerpt is. It said, "My book, Escort, features guys who are selling their bodies. Levi has a nice body, but he's not in that league at all. He doesn't have what it takes to get $150 an hour. His best feature is his face. He has something in his face. Were I Levi, I'd want to be an actor for camera, not stage. I'd pursue a career in acting. If he's got the right management, he should try to act. He's no different from Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, a lot of major stars who didn't come from a superior background. He's got something you can go all the way with, a great face." You know, and that was so, you know, so David, you know, he came in and he knew all of these wonderful people from, you know, the past. And, you know, he was always just a professional. And then the last story I wanted to share, if anybody here has been to lunch with David, you know that David's universal sign for lunch is over was raising his hands. You know, that's what he did. If he wanted the waitress, if he wanted, you know, the check, his hands went up. Well, at one point, David had a gardener, and the gardener was suddenly got very ill, and I'm not sure what it was, but it was something that needed surgery, or he was going to die. Basically, it was life-threatening, something big, like something he had to have surgery of some sort. And his insurance hadn't gone through, and it was an issue, and the guy was going to die, and I mean, it was really sad. And one of his friends who worked with the hospital, I don't know if it was Vincent or if it was Andrew or if it was someone else, they said, "You know, David, if he goes through the emergency room, they will take him, and then once he's in, they will do whatever has to be done." Well, you know, for David, it wasn't enough to tell the guy, this is what you need to do. It was like, we're taking him to the hospital. So we went to the hospital with, his gardener, I believe his daughter was there, and I don't remember, there was a few people of the family and then us. And we're in the hospital, and David had never really been to a public emergency room. And I can't remember if it was Jackson or something similar. And if you've ever been to the Jackson ER, you wait 8 hours, and there's a lot of people. It's a whole different world than David was used to. And there was a lady who was in a wheelchair, and she was in some sort of crisis. And she obviously has been, it looked like she had been in the hospital many times before, and she was just moaning and moaning, and, no one's really paying attention. It's packed. And all of a sudden, I see David's hands go up. And I'm like, I knew what he was doing, but I said, David, what are you doing? This woman needs attention. I said, David, this doesn't work here. He goes, no, somebody will come. And David, no, this is not how it happens here. And, eventually he put his hands back down. He realized this is not, we're not at Balin's, as he wanted me to properly pronounce it. The good thing is his gardener had his surgery. Hopefully he's moved on to live a happy, healthy life, David was wonderful. I'm very, very, very blessed to have had him in my life. The advice he gave me, he was there when I met my husband, my future husband, who's my husband now, and David was always a great guy. And I just want to give a shout out to Arturo, because Arturo started out as David's tenant, And you can go to the next photo. I was supposed to tell him to change the slide. Arturo moved in as a tenant, what used to be my office, which was that first photo there. And and I know for the next quite a few years, Arturo and David was there. And I always felt safe, and I would tell people when the conversation came up, I would always say, I'm so glad he has someone there, because if something, were to happen to him, David was just too trusting, too wonderful, too generous. He lived in Miami Beach. He lived alone when he moved into, at the end of Lincoln Road. He didn't move alone. Arturo went with him. But I always felt so comfortable. So, Arturo, thank you for being here. And as I wrap it up, let me just say, these were some of my photos of David, and here he was with Escort, which he loved that show. And I think he's singing Montevideo or something, David Vance. You might recall it better than I. All right, and then now I would like to introduce another individual who was important in David's life, in David's theatrical career. She's going to say a few words, theater critic and writer, Mary Damiano.
Pink. When I think of pink, I think of David Leddick. I don't know if pink was David's favorite color, but I believe it was his signature color. I always picture him wearing white and pale pink. It flattered his skin and his shock of white hair and made him look to me like a tall, lean Energizer bunny, hopping down Lincoln Road and across the stages of our theaters. As an arts journalist who, back in the day, worked primarily in the gay press, I first met David more than 20 years ago when he played the role of Arthur the Angel in the concert version of David Sexton's It's a Fabulous Life. I was fascinated by David Leddick's presence on stage and the cadence of his speech. He had a really interesting way of speaking. How many people here listen to their answering machines or voicemails at one time or another to hear, "Hello, this is David Leddick calling for you"? You know. David used to call me Mary Damiano, pronouncing my last name with a mo at the end instead of a no. I always thought I heard him wrong, and then he mailed me something, and the envelope was addressed to Mary Damiano. By that time, we'd known each other too long to correct him, so to David, I remained Mary Damiano. Over the years, I wrote about David a lot. about his books, the shows he appeared in, like Nature of the Beach, Secrets of the Chorus, and his show about Quentin Crisp. He was always a joy to interview because he was so interesting and immensely quotable. He always fascinated me because of his penchant for reinvention. David Leddick was the master of reinvention. A distinguished naval career, a ballet dancer, a Mad Men era advertising executive, and then when most men of his age and time retired and moved to Florida to spend their days playing golf, David reinvented himself again, this time as an author, book editor, and performer. One of my favorite things that David ever told me was his advice on writing and how to cure writer's block. Just skip over the parts that are giving you trouble, David said. The readers won't know. I didn't believe that, but I got a kick out of the fact that David did. At some point, our professional relationship turned into a friendship. David would invite me to lunch, always at Balin's here on Lincoln Road. I loved my lunches with David. He always wore either all white or pink and white. He was funny, and I enjoyed his wit and his stories and his perspective on life. He had charm and charisma like no one I've ever met. He was unendingly curious about things and especially about people. He always asked what I was working on, what I was writing about, what I wanted out of life, where I saw myself in 5 or 10 years. When I was with David, and I know I'm not alone in this, he made me feel like the most interesting person in the room when we all know that honor always belonged to David. David taught me a lot of things besides the value of good moisturizer. David taught me that we're never too old to learn something new, to start something new, or to try something new. David taught me to follow my dreams and passions. But my favorite piece of advice from David was about relationships. He said to not get caught up in the little things, like whose turn it is to take out the garbage. Those things are not worth fighting about, he said. Just be the one to do it and know that you've done your part to keep your relationship happy. I miss David, as we all do, and always will. When I reviewed the 2003 production of It's a Fabulous Life, the one with Nick Richburg, I wrote this about David's performance. David Leddick is heavenly as Arthur the Angel, a role that was written for him. While Leddick has the charm and charisma for the role, he also plays the part with a wink to the audience. He walks a fine line between being himself and playing the part and does it splendidly. That was David. He poured all of himself into everything he did, every reinvention, and everything he created. The greatest role he ever played was himself, and we're all richer for having known him. It's hard to imagine David not being physically here, but maybe now he's morphed into his version of Arthur the Angel, watching over us, always gently guiding us with his unique advice, and always being a presence in our lives. And now, please welcome to the stage members of the Miami Gay Chorus.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Laura, and this is the Miami Gay Chorus, and we are so honored to be joined by Marielle for this next song, and I think all of you will recognize it. I personally did not know David, but listening to all of these beautiful stories, I can tell he was a man who loved a good song, who loved to shake his booty, and so if you would like to dance with us, if you would like to sing along, we strongly encourage it.
Oh, yeah. Come on, put your hands together if you feel it. This is a celebration of life, baby. Oh, yeah. Little Disney boy. Clock strikes upon the hour, and the song begins to fade. Still enough time to feel
Amazing.
And we love you, David.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Round of applause for the gay chorus. Laura and Marianne. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you guys. That was wonderful. Aww. Thank you, Marianne. I love you. That was great, right? Full joy. So, David would want for him to have the last words. So I'm gonna quote some famous Leddickisms, which is how he closed out his obituary. Of course, David. The one was not in the obituary, but I say it all the time, and we have a really great photograph from David Vance. Can you share the slide? David would say to me when I would complain about something, well, never say no, just ask for more money. Stays with me to this day. The next slide, Eddie already said this one, but we're gonna say it again. Always moisturize your neck, say it with me. Someday it may be your face. Words to live by. And then this last line of him, this was my favorite thing that he said, and it inspired me. Eddie said it earlier. I had it in the end of As Time Goes By. It's a guiding light in my life. He said, when I look back on my life, the greatest successes and the worst failures both feel very much the same. What is important is that you live and you didn't have any what might have beens. Go out there and fight for your dreams. Dare to do it. Give it your best shot. And in that way, whether you succeeded or you failed, you will always succeed. Thank you, David Leddick. Thank you guys for coming tonight. Thank you.